So, welcome to Conservation Conversations. I'm Sean O'Brien, the president of NatureServe. And as usual, I'm excited, but I think once you start hearing from Rachael today, you're going to be excited too, because Rachael is full of energy, and this won't be your only opportunity to hear from her because she is all over the internet and the social media outlets and is somewhat of what people refer to as an influencer. And we may actually talk about what it means to be an influencer on the show today, because that's not a normal thing for NatureServe. We would like to be influencers, and we think that we work with influencers when it comes to conservation decision-making. But Rachael is a different kind of influencer. So Rachael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, so, some time ago, I can't remember exactly when, you showed up in my Instagram feed, because people talk about Instagram feeds being toxic, but my Instagram feed is full of like the Nature Educator and pictures of birds, people looking at amazing landscapes. And so I find Instagram to be actually quite relaxing. And so you showed up some time ago. And so I've been following you on Instagram, and I want to find out a little bit, like, how did you sort of become an internet influencer? And what's your background? I know you have a background in biology and things, but I want to hear a little bit about your path to where you got to.
Yeah, for sure. So I have always been a nature nerd since I was a little kid.
We love nerds.
Yes. Yeah, me too. I love being a nerd. I love nature. I'm proud of it. But yeah, ever since I was young, I was so curious about the natural world. I grew up on Vancouver Island, and my parents were sailors and very outdoorsy. So I spent a lot of time on the ocean and exploring the Gulf Islands. So lots of time just with nature and really looking around me and observing all the different things. So I've definitely had a passion for nature and the natural world since as long as I can remember. But then going into my adulthood, yeah, I studied geography and environmental studies in university and worked as a naturalist. So doing nature guiding and school programs, special events of every kind of nature topic under the sun, from forest ecosystems to ocean ecosystems and wetlands, different species at risk, introduced species, all the topics under the sun. So I kind of have done that for about maybe like over 10 years now. And then alongside that, and maybe some people listening can relate, but finding consistent work in the environmental field can be challenging sometimes. It's a lot of contract work, seasonal work, and sometimes it's not paid super well, especially when you're getting started. Mm-hmm. So I ended up kind of going down a bit of a marketing and communications avenue with my career as well at the same time. So I kind of had two parallel careers developing. And so I started working in marketing and kind of like digital marketing, social media, things like that. And so with my nature nerdiness and my social media, digital marketing brains, it kind of mushed together to create the Nature Educator, which is my social media handle, where I create educational content about nature for people to watch and enjoy for free. And this all started, the Nature Educator started during COVID. So in 2020, when everything shut down, where I live, even some of the parks shut down.
Yes.
Which is really, that's a whole other thing to talk about, but very, very interesting. And so a lot of my work really slowed down, and I'm a very creative person, very energetic person, very curious and nerdy. So I was like, what can I do with all my interests and skills to keep myself busy in this very different time that we all experienced? So I started creating video content on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all the kind of platforms. And I was doing it from more like, I started off doing it for myself, just for something to do, but people really loved it. And I was getting tons of positive feedback, and the videos started doing really, really well. And I was sitting around 3,000 followers on Instagram until March 2023. So this year.
Okay.
I had a few videos just go off. They went viral, and it put me at 100,000 followers.
So what was the first one, and what was it about that video?
The first one I think it was Western Trillium. I did a video on Western Trillium, and I was talking about how the leaves, or what you think are the leaves, are actually bracts, which are a modified leaf. And it just blew people's minds that, that a lot of people didn't know what a bract was. And is it still technically a leaf because it's a modified leaf? So there's all these discussions happening in the comments, which I always love seeing, because people just kind of have conversations in the comment section, and I get to kind of jump in and talk to people. But it created a lot of interest and spur. And Western Trilliums they're a very beloved plant. So a lot of
in general, people love the trillium.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there was a few things, but there was a lot of interest in this plant. And then just how I kind of started off the video with a bit of a hook, being like, these aren't leaves. People are like, what? How is that not a leaf? So then they want to watch and they want to share it with other people. So I think that video, it was kind of a perfect combination of a few different things. And it just went viral. I think it has 1.5 million views.
I remember that one, by the way. So
oh, great. That's wonderful. Maybe that was the one that popped up on your feed, your algorithm.
It might be.
And hooked you in. But yeah, and then during that time, I was getting a lot of interest in my page, getting lots of new followers, lots of comments and likes, shares, things like that. So every video I was posting was kind of building off of that. It was kind of getting more engagement than maybe it would have otherwise if it was just a regular video I had posted. So there was a few videos that just went off. And so that really got me to where I am today, which is great. And I'm still, making videos. And
so you were talking about the challenges of making a living as a naturalist, and probably doing different itinerant field projects and things like that. And you mentioned earlier that people get to watch these videos for free. But if this is your sort of career, and I know that to make those kinds of videos and to make enough of them and to customize them for different platforms is not an insignificant activity. Not that everybody can do it, but how does one make a living doing what you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is something that, as in the social media world, there's always something new to try and different things to do. So I'm always learning. But a lot of content creators or influencers, they work with certain brands to kind of sponsor them. And that helps, make money so you can make this content, whether it's promoting a specific product or, like, for example, for an environmental influencer such as myself, which is still bizarre to say the word influencer to me because I come from that kind of nature background. I'm like, influencer. But working with companies that maybe they provide outdoor gear or different cameras to capture the content that I'm using for my account, maybe different hiking shoes, things like that. I recently did a partnership with a free app called Birda, which is a bird watching app, and it helps you identify species, and it's kind of gamified, so it makes it a little fun. There's challenges, things like that. So I made some videos in partnership with them to promote their product, but it's also something that I really enjoy and use anyways. So I always make sure I'm partnering with companies where our values align. And
so in the true confessions category, I now have that app on my phone.
Oh,
because I learned about it from you. I didn't know about it before. I have 15 different birding apps on my phone, this Sibley and Birds Near Me and Merlin and all these things, but I did not have that one before. So I have been playing with it a little bit recently. So Good job.
Oh, that's great.
Evidently, that whole influencing thing is working.
Yeah.
But what's important about this influencing is the message that you're trying to get out, right? It's sort of like academically interesting to figure out like how did somebody become an influencer and like the process and all of that. But what really matters is we have this crisis facing the world, right? Species are going extinct faster than they ever have. The environment is incredibly challenged, and we need for people to understand that and engage with that. And so as much as you want to be an influencer, really you have another purpose.
Yes, for sure. And that's why I started the whole account too. Well, as I said before, I was, I had all this energy and time and creativity and nerdiness I needed to get out of my system. But my main purpose of this account is to provide free educational content for people because people are on their phones already. They're on Instagram, they're scrolling. So my goal is to try to stop people in their scroll and get them to connect with nature through their device, which seems very impossible because, it's not like you're physically in nature, but it's still a tool. Like social media is a tool where we can connect people. And you just never know if someone's just sitting on their couch, they're scrolling and they see a video about a fern and they're like, hey, like I love ferns. Like I want to learn about this fern. They watch the video. The next time they go out for a walk, or maybe the video will inspire them to go outside and look at the ferns. Hopefully they'll have more of a connection to the world around them. And that's my biggest goal with my account, is to get people to just connect more to the plants, the animals, the ecosystems around them. And in turn, like from that, they will build more pro-environmental behaviors. They will care more about nature. They'll want to protect lands from development and all these things. So I'm trying to capture people on the internet and get them to care and love nature as much as I do. So that will in turn benefit the environment.
Right. So that benefiting the environment part is the thing that's interesting to me. But you were talking about inspiring people. Do you have a favorite story from a fan or from a follower who said, because you did this, I went to and did something?
I get a lot of messages, like direct messages in my inbox and comments on my videos. And I'm just always blown away by how much people actually watch my videos and take things away from them. And then they report back and they're like, oh my gosh. Like for an example that I've just thought of is chitons. So I made a chiton video. I think it was in the summer, like this past summer. And it blew people's minds that this creature even existed. And a lot of them are super well camouflaged in the intertidal zone. And it blew people's minds that these animals exist and they're all around the world. And since I posted that video, I still get messages being like, I saw a chiton today. Like I'd never seen a chiton before. It's so cool. Like you've opened my mind up to this animal I didn't even know existed. But one of the coolest things, like maybe not a specific example, but more broad, is a lot of my videos are very specific to a certain plant or animal. And it opens people's minds up to noticing the biodiversity that exists, because people will go for a walk and they'll just see plants. Like maybe you've heard of plant blindness before, that term where it's all just green. They're all plants, they're all bushes. But when you actually look at individual species, you start to realize the immense biodiversity that exists, and therefore that is being threatened in this world, in this current, time that we're in. So that is always really neat for me to hear, because people are watching these little videos and they're like, wow, I didn't know that existed. And now I see it outside when I go for a walk. And so it's planting those little seeds in people's minds. And then you just never know like what exactly they're going to take away from it. But it's always really nice to hear back from people what they saw, what they experienced, and hearing their stories as well. It's really neat.
And those little stories are really interesting. I went for a walk in the summer with a friend. We were going to try and see the meteors, but it was too cloudy. Mm. And so we ended up walking back, and in the flashlight caught a glimpse of color on a plant. And so we stopped and we spent about 15 minutes looking at a couple of plants on the side of the trail, and ended up seeing, 3 species of grasshoppers and several species of spiders. And then there was like a bee that was like accidentally hanging out overnight. And in this little tiny area, no bigger than like a gallon container, there ended up being like 10 or 15 species of things that we were able to photograph and identify with iNaturalist. And it was sort of this amazing natural history moment. And it was really beautiful to see. And it'd be so easy to just walk right past.
100%. Yeah. And that's one of the things I always encourage people to just stop and notice. And the art of noticing is incredible because, yeah, as you said, if you're walking through on a trail or it's all just, you don't realize what you're actually walking past. But when you stop and look, it's like, wow, there's actually so much diversity in this really small area. And I noticed that a lot with tide pools too, because if you're walking along the beach and, there's like some rocky intertidal environment where there's tide pools, it's so easy to just walk right past them. But when you stop and look, you start to just see more and more and more in there. And it's so fun. And it keeps your curiosity sharp. I also tell people to always stay curious because you can never stop learning from nature. There's always something new to learn. We'll never all be experts. Like we'll never know it all. No one will ever know everything about nature because it's always changing. And yeah,
and we're always discovering new things because we have the ability to look in more places. So as much as the extinction crisis is really scary, we're also constantly discovering new species. Not that they've newly evolved necessarily, but that they've been finally recognized by science as a new species. And that's also really exciting. So you mentioned that you sort of grew up always curious about nature, and your parents took you outside and sailing and things like that. Was there a teacher or a moment that was part of your inspiration for following? Because a lot of people like, oh yeah, I've always been interested in nature, but I studied engineering because I wanted to get a job, right? You sort of followed your dream.
yes.
Was there an inspirational person in there?
There were a few inspirational people. When I started my naturalist journey, I kind of started off doing volunteering with local nonprofits, doing kind of that interpretation, like in the classroom. You bring a bunch of stuff into a classroom and the kids look at it and you kind of guide their experience. But my first like real naturalist job was with the local government where I live. And I learned, like, it was like 0 to 100. I learned so much about being a naturalist, how to create programs that are interesting, that are going to be enjoyable for people instead of just rambling on about whatever you see. Like it's very well planned, well thought out. It's thematic. There's all those little things in there to really get people to be excited and connect to what you're talking about. And also my learning of the natural world, like plant identification and learning about different species and things like that, it skyrocketed. And my coworkers at the time were hugely supportive and definitely inspired me to just learn and stay curious. And I find too, when you're surrounded by different naturalists, because naturalists all have a different style. Like maybe you've attended a parks interpretive talk and they'll be in costumes, there'll be a guitar and a ukulele or something, and they're singing about bears or whatever. And then you might see someone else and they use humor and they're really funny, but they have no props at all. And then some people use a lot of photos and videos and things like that. So there's so many different ways that you can be a naturalist and educate people in your style and creativity. And just being exposed to so many different people and their approaches, it just makes your mind open up to the many ways that people enjoy learning and connect to environmental education. So
I have a word in mind for your style. But I'm curious, what's your one word for what represents your naturalist style?
One word for my natural style. I think what comes to mind for me is energy, maybe energy or excitement. One of those two I would pick. Because I am that's some of the feedback I get quite a bit with my videos is I'm always just so excited, even if it's the tiniest little barnacle or something that seems so not interesting or not cute, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not charismatic megafauna. It's like this ugly insect or something. And I'm like, look at it. It's so cool. So I try to get people to match my energy of excitement by being, thrilled to see anything. Like even if it's a horrible day, or horrible meaning like, not ideal weather for people that want to go outside. Like it's windy.
Which
it's
seems to
windy.
be a common theme for you.
Yes.
You're often in the rain.
Yes. Yeah. And I do live in the Pacific Northwest in the temperate rainforest. So it does rain quite a bit. And if I waited for beautiful days, I would never be making videos. So, but I love going outside in all weather. So it works out great. I just have to try to keep my camera dry.
Yeah.
But
So
one of my videos that did really well was small flowered blue-eyed Mary. So those teeny tiny little wildflowers. And it was pouring rain. Like the audio was terrible because all you could hear was raindrops on my hood. And but that video, I don't remember how much it got, but I think it's probably around 300,000 views and so many comments. And a lot of the feedback was like, it's so great that you're going out in the pouring rain and inspiring people to, you can still go outside when it rains. Just put on your gear and appreciate what's happening outside. We need the rain. The rain's great, So yeah.
So my word for you would be awe, as in you're constantly awestruck by what you're seeing. And that translates into that energy and enthusiasm that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Awe. I like that. Yeah. I'm always in awe.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the things that's so engaging about the videos. It's like, oh, what's Rachael excited about today?
I love that.
The challenge in doing what you're doing is sort of staying fresh. And the awe keeps you fresh on one level, but because you were saying there's so much to always learn in social media, there's a whole other set of learning curves. And it's important because of what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get people engaged with nature and to care about the world and the planet. So I'm just sort of thinking about like, how do you stay fresh? I mean, do you actually like have to spend time reading articles about how to be the newest kind of influencer, which sounds like torture to read those kinds of articles?
Yeah, I think the algorithms change daily. From what I've heard, they change daily. So they're constantly changing. But one thing that stays consistent is your brand. So my brand is basically what we just talked about. It's being super excited about all the things that I encounter. And that's how people know me. So if I keep that consistent, the people who are already following me and are enjoying my content, they're going to be happy because I'm making the same kind of content. And it's interesting because if I make something a little bit different, someone always is like, what? Like I was just in Mexico for a friend's wedding. And while I was there, I was like, look at all this amazing nature. I'm going to share some of this. And I got a few comments being like, that's not the Pacific Northwest. And I was like,
you're off
right.
brand.
Yes, you are right. I am a little off brand here. Because most of my content I just do where I live. So staying on brand and kind of going what with people are expecting of you is helpful. But yeah, there's always ways that you can increase your reach new people. And that's always a goal for me because I want more and more people to connect to nature and create those pro-environmental behaviors and care more about nature. So with that, it takes a good amount of just staying current. I don't read articles thank goodness, like what you were saying, that sounds so boring, but you have to spend a good amount of time on the apps and looking at what other people are doing, what other people, like what's working for other people. And there's all these different trends. So like videos where a certain style will be really popular. So people get to know that style and they look for videos similar to that. And I usually don't do those, but I could try doing stuff like that to increase my reach to new people. But yeah, it's always changing. I try to keep it interesting and yeah, but still stay on brand. So it's kind of a balance, but always learning. There's always changes. You just have to try to keep up the best you can.
And in your neck of the woods, there's a lot of different biodiversity to feature. I mean, you could do marine and intertidal and aquatic. I actually went to Vancouver Island last summer and went snorkeling in the Cowichan River, looking for rare species, and got to see pearly shell mussels and crayfish and things like that. It was really cool.
Oh, that's amazing. I actually have never snorkeled in the Cowichan River or the lake there, but it's on my bucket list for sure.
You should definitely do it.
Yeah, I should for sure. But it's definitely, it's an incredibly biodiverse place. And with the different seasons too, there's like migratory birds and just lots of changes that happen throughout the year. One thing that's unique to my account is I never do the green screen type videos. Like all my videos it's things I have personally encountered. And that's my style and that's what I like to do. So people will request, like, can you make a video on a cougar? And I'm like, if I see a cougar and I'm not
and I have my camera on
my health first, if it's a safe space to make a video, then I will. But I get lots of requests and I'm like, I'd love to make a video on that. If I ever see that animal or plant, I will definitely do that. But that's part of my style is I record everything in person and I record it myself. I don't do a lot of other creators, they'll green screen themselves with a video of a jellyfish or something behind them. And it could be anywhere in the world. And they'll share some fun facts and information about that species. But yeah, my style is in person. I try to keep it as candid and authentic as possible. So
I like that. Like we're saying with the flowers and the rain, the fact that you're out there in the weather and in the elements, and maybe there's mosquitoes around and you're trying to talk about something else, makes it very authentic. And I think engaging with the public. So one of the things I'm always curious about with people who are engaged in this kind of work and are clearly passionate about the world and about the environment is you want to have an impact on people. You want to leave essentially a legacy from your work as the nature educator on all of the different social media handles or social media apps. What is your, like, do you have a thought about like, this is what I'm trying to accomplish with we've talked a little bit about that, but like, I'm thinking in a bigger picture, like when you look back in 10 years kind of thing.
Yeah. I think when people think about Rachael, the nature educator, I think I would want them to think about how I was I'm talking like as if I was dead, but when I think of a legacy, I always think like, oh, that person is passed. What are they remembered by? But yeah, I'd want to be remembered as someone who was just so passionate about trying to get everyone to connect to the natural world in a time where we could be, some people are extremely disconnected from the natural world, in a time where we need to be connected in order to save the earth and ourselves, our species, living in this world that's changing so rapidly. And just kind of being one of those conservationists, those environmentalists that are just really trying to do their part in this bigger picture. And as that kind of educator that's trying to make learning fun and nature fun. So
And do you have any like special projects coming up or some places you're going to go where you're going to like maybe do some research in advance about things you might see so that you can tell some new stories, or are you going to be focused in the Pacific Northwest again for a while?
I think for the next little while, I will be mostly in the Pacific Northwest, but I do have a possible trip coming up in the new year to Botswana,
Oh,
which would be very cool. Still seeing if the details are all going to sort out with that, but that would be really interesting. I'm hoping to do more and more kind of more international type content. And I get that request quite a bit from people who are following me because I have followers from all around the world and they're like, can you come to Australia and make us some videos? I'm like, I would love to, but I'm slowly building up to things like that. So I hope that I'll have more kind of international opportunities to share species from all around the world. But my base will always be the Pacific Northwest. It's my home. I love it here. So there'll be lots of that kind of content continuing as well.
so do you talk much about people eating from nature in your work?
Yes. So that is an interesting topic, and I'm glad you brought that up. So I come from kind of a parks conservation background. So I was always kind of mentored and told to not harvest from nature because in parks and protected areas, that is for nature, right? So when you think about all the development and land use change that has happened all around the world, there's so much natural habitat that has been destroyed or completely removed that is now unavailable for so many species. So that's kind of the mindset that I've been mentored in for a long time. So harvesting from nature is something that I'm always like, I'm still building that relationship with myself. There are some things that I like, if berries, for example, like I'll eat wild berries. And there's a few other things that are abundant, and I'm like, okay, my 5 berries are not gonna, make a whole bird species go extinct, so it's okay. But so there's that kind of part of it where personally I'm still kind of developing that connection. And then there's also the side of, as someone who is providing content on the internet, people are from all around the world who are watching my videos. So if I provide like how to identify and eat this species, I don't know what species are in a tiny town in, on the other side of the world. Like maybe they have a lookalike. Yeah. And it's poisonous. So I always have a bit of hesitancy to post that type of content because I'm worried that with misidentification, it could end up with someone getting sick. And when I have mentioned, I've done a couple videos where I talk about harvesting and edible, it's usually berries. Mm-hmm. I am always like, do your research, make sure you identify this correctly, like go with people who are knowledgeable, bring your field guides. And I talk about the region that it's in. So I try to make it as crystal clear as possible, but you just never know if people are going to read that. You don't know how much of the video people are going to watch. So there's a few things where I'm like, I love to share those things, especially in person. In person is way different because you have a group physically with you in a specific location. You can look at it together. You can compare between other species. But on the internet, I keep a little bit of a arm's length from it, but I have done it a couple of times. With all that being said, connecting to nature, I love encouraging people to use their senses to engage with the natural world. So, like closing your eyes and listening to the sounds and plugging your ears and looking around with your eyes, like trying to really focus on different senses as a way to connect with nature. And taste is one of those. And a lot of people love foraging and love to, like, it's so interesting because we're so disconnected from the natural world in that way. Most of us get our groceries or our food at the grocery store, right? We don't just go out and pick all, it's just the world we're in now. We go to the grocery store usually. So it's a really interesting way for people to connect to nature. And for some people, it's one of the big reasons they go out into nature is to forage. So I also celebrate those people as well, because it's a really impactful way to connect with the natural world. And of course, Indigenous people have been connected to the natural world since time immemorial. And so with my perspective of parks, I'm also extremely respectful of those practices and that continuing to this day, because that's extremely important and a part of their culture. So it's kind of a big question for me.
Yeah.
And that's a big answer as well. But
well, it's a good and thoughtful answer, because I do know of stories where people learned of what was edible in one place, specifically mushrooms, went somewhere else, and there was a lookalike that was not edible, and they ended up in the hospital.
Okay. So, yes. Don't want that to happen.
With things like mushrooms, I think that's particularly risky in terms of making mistakes. Berries probably a little bit less so, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. It's very true.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, what other things do you want to get out there into the world? So you have, when you're doing your videos on TikTok and Instagram and things, you really have sort of a window of a couple of minutes and then people are gone. In this setting, you have a little bit more of an open soapbox. So if there's some message that you'd like to have out there that doesn't feel like it fits in with like sitting in front of a little trillium, want to see if you have like something you want to say sort of to the world about Rachael, the nature educator, and what people should be thinking about in the world these days.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things that I try to encourage people more in person than on the internet, and I did kind of briefly mention this earlier, but it's just stay curious. Like, just stay curious all the time. We will never know everything. Even an expert in a very specific field, they know a lot, but if they're researching, they don't know everything yet. So, and with things always changing, there's always something new to learn. So I always encourage people to just stay curious. And there's some topics that can seem extremely inaccessible for people because of the academia side of thing. And just stay curious, keep learning. Don't feel like you're never going to know what mushroom to pick or whatever it is, just keep learning, reach out to people in your community. There's so many different naturalist groups and, different communities that you can become a part of, and you can just never stop. You'll never know everything. Just keep learning all the time. And with that, I encourage people to also, because sometimes there can be judgment with knowledge, like people think I know everything. I do not know everything. I know it's like the iceberg, like there's so much more to learn. I don't know everything, even though it may seem that way. So it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know the answers to things. It's just an opportunity for us to come together and just keep learning. So
awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, Rachel, it's been very refreshing chatting with you today. And I'm so glad that you're on our side and educating people across the world in this new format, because, we have these old, nature programs, and we talk about Attenborough and other people who've done amazing things for the world in terms of educating people, but those are not as viewed as potentially things that you're doing now. And so I want to thank you for being out there and trying to spread the word.
Well, thank you. I appreciate all those kind words. And I'm just so happy that you invited me here today and I got to talk with you and all your listeners or viewers as well. So thank you for tuning in and for having me.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. And thanks everyone for listening and watching. This is Conservation Conversations, and I'm Sean O'Brien, the President and CEO of NatureServe. And I've been talking with Rachael Tancock, who's the nature educator on all of the social media platforms that you could ever want to find. And we're approaching the end of the calendar year, so it's the holiday season. So we want to wish everybody a happy holiday season and remind people that often the end of the year is a time that people think about supporting nonprofit organizations that they know and love. And you're listening, so you know and love NatureServe, and you love us more now that we spend an hour with Rachel. And So please, if you're so inclined, go to natureserve.org and make a donation to support the important work we do, trying to reduce the impacts of the sixth extinction and extinction in general. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month.